Story 1. Chaotic romantic relationships driven by passion, then abruptly losing all interest. Argumentativeness, but paradoxically a simultaneous sensitivity to criticism. I could dish it, but could not take it very well. A trail of unfinished projects, hobbies, and tasks. Feeling on edge all the time. A general feeling of listlessness and boredom with life unless I was driving towards some singular goal. Indecisiveness. Whole careers started and stopped. Academic and professional potential wasted while I hesitated and worried about making a bad decision. Until circumstances made a decision for me anyway. Constant tapping. Difficulty being concise. Difficulty explaining something without connecting every single detail to make it understandable. Story 2. Some people sometimes do not have any songs playing in their heads. Story 3. Strictly adhering to social norms and becoming agitated when others do not can be challenging. It turns out most people do not constantly recite or follow an imaginary rule book in their heads. Story 4. Brain noise. Apparently, a very large number of people don't have a constant level of noise in their brain, whether it's an internal monologue or some kind of background noise, unless they are intentionally thinking. I did not learn this until one of my friends looked at me like I was crazy, and my other friend with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder said her brain is only quiet when she is medicated. I have never had a quiet brain. Story 5. Apparently, no one else in my office can hear the fluorescent lights or the ambient electrical hum of the printer. Story 6. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder here. I have a constant inner dialogue that races through my mind all day, every day. It is a big part of how I experience life and the world. When I am alone, I respond to this voice out loud to process my thoughts. I did not realize this was not a universal experience until recently. Story 7. Finding loud noise physically painful. Not being able to wear non-stretchy or soft clothing without discomfort. I could never figure out how people tolerated jeans, tight-waisted pants, tailored shirts, or wool anything. Putting off tasks until the absolute last minute and not being able to start them earlier no matter how hard you try unless it is something that really interests you. As a kid, I could never understand how other kids just happily wandered through life not having to know everything that was happening, what time it was, what we were doing next, where we were going, and so on. Story 8. How I become addicted to a song, actor, artist, or show for 2 weeks, then lose interest immediately on the 14th day. Story 9. Not everyone's mind has thoughts. I am a bottom-up processor too, so just existing is a constant state of overclocking my central processing unit. Story 10. Being very sensitive to loud noises or bright lights. Many people do not get overstimulated. I also felt silly when I realized that not everyone bounces their leg furiously when concentrating on work. Story 11. Not being able to feel awake for hours after sleeping, no matter how much I slept. The opposite happens when going to bed or falling asleep. It turns out that people get some cortisol shots in their synapses right when waking up, and we with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder wake up with much less stress hormones. It sounds to me like neurotypical people are getting an advantage. Story 12. I thought everyone chronically daydreamed. I found out at age 15 that people can turn their thoughts off. I thought everyone copied and mimicked others, and I was just slow at it while others were better. I thought everyone memorized rules about etiquette and rude behavior, and we all just learned through mistakes and faced the consequences. I thought everyone was brutally honest, said what they meant, and were direct with each other. Story 13. I do not know if it fits, but I was really shocked that other people can think about nothing and be relaxed. Ever since I was able to think, my brain is constantly working, whether it is overthinking or daydreaming. It was a very different experience the first day I got attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medication as a 19-year-old. Story 14. It is normal for some sort of sound to be playing in your head at all times. Not just one song at a time, but 3. Take it or leave it. However, it will only be the same 3 lines repeated over and over again for hours, maybe even days. Story 15. Here are a couple that I don't think I saw mentioned. All or nothing. The moment something goes wrong or a step is misaligned in the process, my world is flipped upside down. This coincides with my inability to typically just get up and do something. I have to run all of the steps in my head first, or I can get really flustered. Sometimes this extends to muscle memory tasks like taking out the trash. Out of sight, out of existence. If I can't see or hear it, I will forget it exists. This is typically in terms of tasks I don't immediately want to do, like laundry, mowing the lawn, or even remembering to watch a certain movie later that isn't part of my hyperfixation. Story 16. Everyone has games or projects they don't finish. Therefore, it is entirely normal that I finish maybe 20% of the games I actually pick up. My hobbies often get left unfinished, even though I greatly enjoy them and want to see them completed. However, once I put something down, nothing short of an extraordinary event can make me pick it up again. Entirely normal. Story 17. When people talk about how much work sucks, it is more metaphorical than I realized. Before getting medicated, work was literally physically painful. I never mentioned it because I assumed when people said work was exhausting or killer, that was what they meant. I would use tricks like snacking or splashing my face with water to try to distract from or soothe the pain. Story 18. Internal monologue, preparing discussions, brain never shutting down. Story 19. Your mom cutting all the tags out of your clothing by cutting each individual stitch with an X-Acto knife after writing the brand and size down in a notebook. Guess who I got the autism from? Story 20. I asked my neurotypical sister a while ago, don't you hate when you have a song stuck in your head and that second little voice in your head is like a few beats ahead? She looked at me and said, what are you talking about? Second voice. Story 21. I did not understand how other people thought it was strange that I got so excited about things. It turns out that even for someone with autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I experience emotions very intensely. Story 22. In high school, I was stunned to find out that other people can simply decide to do something and immediately do it. I remember a girl in my class asking, I know homework is boring, so why not just do it immediately and enjoy the rest of the day? I could not imagine a world where I could do that. Story 23. How intense my sensory experience of everything is. My frustration level with indirect communication. Ruminating forever. Story 24. Doom piles. I thought everyone did it to keep the rest of the room, bench, or cupboard tidier. It was only when I was exposed to other people's houses that I wondered, where's your dust pile? I also never understood how people do not get hyperfixated on topics or things they find interesting. If you think it is cool enough to want to learn about, why not spend the next 8 hours doing so, even while forgetting to eat and drink? Then, finding out that people cannot ignore their pain. I mean, I had a broken arm for a whole day and ignored it because it was inconvenient at age 5. Endometriosis and many other injuries. But if it is not severe enough to require sitting down because moving makes you lightheaded and nauseous, then I can ignore it until I get home and have a shower. Story 25. Sunlight stings if I don't have transition lenses for my glasses. LED clocks or almost any lights keep me awake at night. I only enjoy soft fabrics and really plush textures. I don't like many foods to the point where saying something about it surprises people because everybody eats this. I hyper-focus on select friends instead of all friends in friend groups. I'm not comfortable talking to people. I make eye contact but keep it because you're supposed to. I have to have a script ready if I need to make an official call, like scheduling an appointment. I get seriously drained after doing one adult thing, such as errands or shopping. I want friends but am also very aware of my flaws and have a constant fear of rejection, humiliation, or bullying. I have many routines. I was not tested until earlier this year. I am almost 30. Story 26. Autism. How is it that no one else is freakishly organized and obsessed with sticking to routines and processes? Story 27. I was told I wouldn't be able to keep a job. I was finally diagnosed again as an adult, started taking medication, and now have a remote job for almost 2 years. Medication has changed my life in many ways. Story 28. I didn't realize I was going to sleep incorrectly until last week, when I saw Atsuko Okitsuka's stand-up routine about it. My whole life, I had been pushing myself until I physically could not keep my eyes open and passed out from exhaustion. I thought that was what falling asleep was. After seeing her routine, I realized I was doing exactly what she described and how absurd it sounded out loud. I asked a bunch of family and friends, and no one else does it like that. Story 29. Eye contact. I was easily in my 30s before I realized I should be making it. I still do not think I do it right. Story 30. I remember first suspecting I had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder after finding a similar thread on here. For me, the things I remember thinking, wait, doesn't everyone do that? Were having a shopping addiction, getting super into a hobby and then randomly dropping it, having music play in your head at all times, it being almost physically painful to do things you don't want to, having a horrible sense of direction, being very sensitive to injustice. There are many more, but before I only knew attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as the loud, outgoing, and hyper people that I knew. I didn't realize there's a whole inattentive side. I have both. Just way more inattentive than hyper. Story 31. Not everyone feels everything all the time. I can feel my guts moving around every time I move or eat, and it is horrible. I can feel the weird vibration type feeling of my blood in my veins. I can feel the airflow from the air conditioning vent across the room moving two of my arm hairs against each other. I am always in pain, uncomfortable, and on edge. Story 32. I was raised by neurotypical people, so I have always been acutely aware that everything about me and everything I do is not normal. Story 33. Being able to physically feel when objects in the room are out of place. Whole body revulsion at things like stepping in grit or getting gristle in meat. Being unable to separate theory from practice. For example, once I found out about climate change, I had to become vegan and stop driving because of it. This also means going through bouts of depression because how can we keep living and pretending when the world is falling apart around us? Actually caring about things like people littering. Being super concise and a great communications writer because I connect all the dots quickly and find the most efficient way to share information. Feeling huge emotions that overwhelm me all the time over everyday things, like old people eating alone. The only time I can stop constantly thinking and making complex connections is when I listen to podcasts because I can't listen and think at the same time. Story 34. Rehearsing conversations before I have to have them, sometimes multiple versions. Other people just happily singing to music in their cars. I genuinely thought they were doing this too. Story 35. I'm not diagnosed, and I guess I'm pretty much on the line between neurotypical and neurodivergent. I haven't made up my mind if I care enough to actually test it, so these may just be my issues. Aphantasia. Up until about 2 years ago, I wasn't aware people can actually see images in their head when they close their eyes. I always thought that to be a figure of speech. I recently learned that it can be connected to autism. People not hearing what I say. I have learned to describe very wordily what I intend to say, and still people understand something completely different. An example is difficult because of language, but I once told a woman, "I'm not going to fight for you or our relationship. You are a person with free will and make your own decisions. You're not a prize to be won, no spoils to be taken. I'm very willing to work on myself and on our relationship. I want to learn and grow together." The message she received was, "You're not worth it. I want to understand why people work and think the way they do, but I am not interested enough in people to actually invest time into it." This seems to be a common theme, at least from talking to other people on the autism spectrum. Story 36. Boredom is not painful to most people. Being bored hurts. My head feels tight, and my whole body is uncomfortable. I described this to someone recently who told me this is not normal. Story 37. Looking people in the eyes and holding that gaze the whole time. I have had to make a conscious effort to change that because, for some reason, no one complained about it when I was a child, but they do now that I am an adult. Story 38. I can hear everything in the environment except the person talking to me. I'm over here like, "Sorry? Could you repeat that?" The air conditioner and printer are running, and someone 5 cubes down is talking on the phone. Story 39. I wake up with random songs stuck in my head, sometimes the same song over and over until I figure out what song it is. Then I play it to get it out of my head, only for the cycle to repeat. Story 40. Hearing the whine of the cable connection back in the cable days. When I am not anxious and stressed, I have one song and 2 to 5 repetitive thoughts, phrases, or to-do tasks on an audio loop in my brain. When I am anxious and stressed, I have a snippet of 2 songs in my head at once. They overlap each other. If I am lucky enough to get some sleep despite the loud noise inside my body, I will wake from my dreams in the middle of the night and maybe have it reduced to only one of the 2 songs still playing. They repeat even in my dreams. I did not know brain worms were not normal. I did not know they are not constant for most people. I did not know they flowed through dreams and into wakefulness the next day. I read deeply into people's intentions and predict their next actions. Yes, everyone can overread actions and intentions, but I am very good at it to the point that it seems most people are just one addition or another, and I can predict what they will do next with accuracy that unsettles others. Mostly, people are fairly basic and formulaic. I am not sure why others do not see the formulas so clearly. I also struggled with making friends. I did not know how to make friends until my mid-30s. I was friends with whoever picked me up and decided I was their friend for my entire life until that point. It was such a mystery to me. I am glad I finally figured that out. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 41. 2 voices are talking in my head. One narrates my thoughts and life I am actually seeing. The other just sings the same 3 lines of a random song I heard years ago. Plus, the voice narrating my life throws in a little quote from a movie or a game every now and then. Story 42. Things I noticed over time. My level of creativity and curiosity about certain subjects is a very deep well that cannot be filled. Hyperfocus is not something many people have. I have a very strong interest in knowing the correct answers to things and connecting people with solutions. I feel lonely because most adults I know have very different interests, and I like creative play, games, and making. So basically, I am a quirky know-it-all who has difficulty being an adult and in social situations, who ignores everyone while doing my own thing when I have checked out of my body on a device, book, or creating. My inner self is a place I can escape to when physical life is too annoying to be present in, or when I am consuming information or creating. However, I do not have control over hyperfocus mode, and sometimes it refuses to let me ignore taste, touch, sounds, and smells in the physical world, to the point of distress over the specific thing it has decided to notice. Story 43. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder sufferer here. The idea that people could choose to work on things and then choose to stop and take a break was mind-blowing to me. I had always assumed that it was normal to have to trick yourself into being motivated to work on anything boring, or wait for the deadline panic motivation to kick in. I thought for years that I was lazy for struggling with homework in school or procrastinating. Parts of my job, such as updating spreadsheets. I could have everything I needed to work open in front of me, ready to go, and my brain just would not engage and stay engaged with it unless I had coping mechanisms or gamified it with habit tracking applications. It turns out people without attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can just choose to work on these things and do not have their brain sabotaging them by constantly shifting their focus to other things. They do not take constant breaks because their brain decides by itself that something else needs their attention. They can just choose when to stop working. My first week taking medication was like living in an entirely different world. It was literally life-changing. Story 44. Wet hair on dry skin or wearing a crispy dry shirt over towel-dried hair. Story 45. A guide of what to do in social situations. Hand gestures to make, when and how long to make eye contact, how much to ask questions versus talk, even what emotions I should be feeling during different conversations. I still do not fully understand all of this, but I have reached a point where it just happens naturally now. It took me years of watching other people interact to create this guide. Story 46. Normal people do not have to try as hard or reach the point of regular burnout or breakdowns. Doing undesirable tasks might be grumbled about, but it does not take every ounce of willpower to do them, nor do they have to fight themselves to focus the entire time. They do not feel exhausted all the time in the same way we do. Going to bed a little earlier will solve most of their problems, whereas I need 2 weeks of hiding in a dark room to fully recover from some interactions. I could go on, but I need to motivate myself to get ready for the day since I let distractions take more of my time than I intended. Story 47. Being very attentive to details. I talk to people and then the next week they forget the conversation we had, but I remember every detail down to what they were wearing that day. Story 48. Driving in complete silence because the day has overstimulated me to the breaking point. Story 49. There is a strong urge in me to speak up when someone embellishes a story I know is not accurate. Something about exaggerating the reality of the situation really irritates me. It turns out people do not like that very much, which was not obvious to me before. I am much better about not doing that now, but the urge is still there. It also helps to remind myself that I do not get every fact right all the time. I make plenty of mistakes. Story 50. I struggle to process emotions and do not get angry like other people. I absolutely hate it because I have been in situations where I appeared to be the odd one out for not crying. Story 51. Being intensely curious and noticing the tiniest details. Whether it is watching an ant on a mission or walking around someone's house studying the textures and designs, I get absorbed in the little worlds around me. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 52. My line of logic. My wife is always mentioning how I think differently. It has caused issues, but now I understand, and she does too. Also, I am often oversensitive. For example, I avoid going to pubs because of too many people talking, and sometimes I need not to be touched. Story 53. Being completely unable to remember simple data such as names, birthdays, numbers, and shopping lists. Story 54. Undiagnosed, but I am sure I have one or the other or both, though I do not know for certain. A song is constantly in my head, even if I have not heard it in months, and it is always a specific part. I remember the years when popular albums and movies came out. When plotting a route to take, my mind visualizes it like a digital map. I repeat phrases from TV shows, or when I see billboards, I say what they say. I have an odd relationship with clothes. It takes me 3 to 4 wears of a new t-shirt to accept it. There is a horrible fork my girlfriend and I will not use, but not the bin for some reason. My mother has these high-pitched Christmas ornaments she puts up, and it is honestly grating to hear when they are being put up. I eat the same food for years and then get tired of it. I love boxes and containers to put things in. Story 55. Object permanence is a concept that adults should understand. If I set something down and walk away, it remains there. Story 56. The people's minds do not have noise all the time. They can actually shut off their thoughts and sit in real silence. That seems so wild to me. Story 57. Editing my Reddit comment 17 times because I made one typo, or because I think I should restructure that sentence, or I believe I didn't clarify something well enough, or I repeated a word shortly after its first occurrence so I have to find a different word, or that paragraph is too long, which would be okay for a PC user, but I know most people use Reddit on their phone, so now I have to restructure the entire comment quickly. Also, there's that one thing I could add or maybe not because that might make the comment too long. And then I'm annoyed because I went over the 3-minute mark and now my comment is marked as being edited. I edited this one 8 times. Story 58. I was shocked to learn that talking about your pets was not a normal conversation starter. At the very least, some people seem to enjoy it. Story 59. Being able to hear everything. The electronic devices humming, fluorescent lights making a buzzing noise, external sounds, the washer going 3 rooms away. Until we got a light-emitting diode television, I thought I hated television, but it turns out what I hated was the noise it makes while it is on. Thankfully, the newer television from 2022, organic light-emitting diode, does not make much noise at all when it is on, which feels amazing. Story 60. Daydreaming about 90% of the time. The biggest issue, though, was not being able to take in or remember what someone said to me. I would push myself to focus on that person if we were face to face and on what they were telling me. I used eye contact and heard the words they were saying, but the words would never stick. It was so frustrating because it made me look like I was not listening or being rude, when really I was just honestly having a hard time recalling the information communicated to me. Story 61. Being honest. I am nearly 40 years old and just now realizing that everyone is bothered by honesty. Even when they ask for the truth, they still prefer you lie to their face. I am sorry, I just cannot do that. Story 62. Hyperfixation. It turns out it is not normal to spend more than 8 hours researching the history of notaries and cylinder seals in ancient Mesopotamia. What triggered it? An offhand remark from a coworker about stamps. Story 63. I always hear a song or past conversation playing in my head on a loop. I feel the need to find all the patterns in everything I see. All sounds and noises register at the same volume in my head. For example, when trying to listen to someone, I hear cars outside, chatter from another room, and the noise of paper, pens, or a chair moving, all at the same volume. My head cannot focus on the important sound, so I end up exhausted trying to understand the conversation. Everyone has to consciously breathe from time to time when feeling overwhelmed. It is also normal to forget to eat, drink, or go to the toilet. Apparently, most people sense these needs before they become urgent. The list is much longer, but I tend to forget these things unless confronted with them. Story 64. Having constant chatter in my head. When I ask someone, "What are you thinking?" they reply, "Nothing," sincerely. I then say, "Well, what is going on up there?" And again, I am met with nothing. It blows my mind that people have quiet heads during their average day-to-day tasks, and that they are not constantly pulled away from what they are doing by distracting thoughts. Sometimes it really is just nothing. Story 65. Apparently, the correct amount of screaming in your brain is supposed to be 0. Story 66. Zoning in and out of a conversation and constantly fidgeting. Story 67. Seeing sounds, known as synesthesia, and experiencing hyperphantasia, which is very vivid in mind imagery. It is never quiet or busy in there. Story 68. My diet. I find comfort in eating the same thing every day for dinner. It usually cycles every 3 to 4 months when I randomly wake up and decide I don't like that item anymore. Common ones include grilled cheese, butter noodles, Texas toast, and cheese quesadillas. I just wrapped up my grilled cheese era and have entered back into butter noodles. I'm in my late 20s, and when I started making friends, they were baffled as to why I do this. I explained that I find it really comforting to have this routine and structure. The idea of trying new foods when I already have foods I like doesn't make sense to me. Why risk trying something if it tastes bad? Does anyone else have rotating food eras? Story 69. Struggling with competing sounds. When there is too much noise, especially many different noises, my eyes stop registering their input, and I cannot tell what is going on. I did not know that other people did not experience this because I could not see them. Story 70. I have both autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And let me tell you how paradoxical my life is. I struggle to understand social cues in people, even though logical thinking is what I value most. Yet, I can perfectly understand the body language of cats. I simultaneously desire structure and routine but can become horribly distracted if my special interests are involved even slightly. For a long time, I thought these experiences were normal. I assumed everyone struggled with these things, but they do not. Being stressed about how many steps I need to take on the sidewalk to switch legs every square was not something typical people cared about. My legs need to be even and have an equal chance on the squares. Story 71. ADHD here. Every time my husband has looked at me and said, "My wife," over the last 3 months, guess what plays in my head? Borat saying, "My wife." And I haven't even seen that movie. Why? Story 72. It bothers me how neurotypical people do not care about the facts and information regarding a topic being mentioned. For example, if someone says, "I do not understand how everyone in my family gets sinus infections when we are only 2 days into the school year," they are apparently just venting and do not necessarily want to hear, "Well, it is likely more than just a sinus infection and can be coronavirus disease 2019, respiratory syncytial virus, or some other seasonal virus." Hygiene practices like frequent hand washing and wearing a mask can help reduce exposure and help keep illness at bay. Personally, I enjoy discussions like that, including when I am the one receiving information. Other people, not so much. Story 73. Finding social norms and conventions stupid. Apparently, people actually like some of them, and that is why they follow them. It is not just extreme peer pressure. Peer pressure never worked on me, so I figured that was the reason I refused to follow the norms. Story 74. Social fatigue. I would hear the occasional, Oh, I hate going to the grocery store. So many people in the way. While I agree, neurotypical people are not drained the same way I get from simple interactions. Afterwards, it sours my mood a lot when I get home and I feel insanely frustrated by those feelings. God forbid I have to talk on the phone because I come across as very blunt and nervous when preparing for it. Apparently, that is not normal at all. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder here. Story 75. Constant songs looping in my head 24/7. I wake up to roll over in the middle of the night, and the hook to my current hyperfocus is playing. Story 76. Apparently, repeating random noises after hearing them is not normal. For example, when my car beeps after locking it, I then beep once in return. On the plus side, my dad did the exact same thing after driving my car yesterday, so I have figured out where the autism comes from. Story 77. Having multiple branching thoughts at once is like Subway surfing my thoughts in my brain. Neurotypical people can have one thought and follow it to conclusion without interruption from other parts of the brain. It feels like having a radio tuned badly to 4 different stations: talk, music, sports, and commercials with static. Cannabis has been a game changer. I feel like a functioning human being. It tunes that radio to 1 or 2 things instead of all 4. I am calmer and can process things better. Story 78. Does anyone else verbally chastise themselves in the third person? Story 79. On that note, I think I really should get that diagnosis. Story 80. Thinking everyone I met was a friend. I have thought people were close friends when they just saw me as an acquaintance. I did not know that not everyone is your friend. On the same note, I was so painfully hurt by the smallest things friends did, which I now know is rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Busy brain. Talking to someone while simultaneously singing a song and having another conversation in my head. Not being able to concentrate without background noise. Getting overwhelmed in public just by the noise, lights, and people. Story 81. Some people just magically know how much time has passed and can keep track of it in their heads. They can set aside enough time to get ready and arrive at places on time. I thought it was totally normal to get wrapped up in something such as reading a book, doing research, or a craft project, and suddenly realize it is 3 a.m. I completely forgot about dinner, and I really have to use the restroom. Story 82. When a television commercial has a jingle that stays in my head, I hear it over and over, but it has very different lyrics. When people hear me singing along with the made-up lyrics, they look at me like I am nuts. For example, the Pepto-Bismol advertisement says, nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea. And in my head, it says, nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, gonorrhea. Story 83. Prosopagnosia, also known as face blindness, is a condition where individuals have difficulty recognizing faces. I thought everyone had this issue and that I was uniquely bad at dealing with it. Story 84. Simple facts, for example. I wear headphones without listening to music. I use 2 to 3 monitors while having an infinite number of tabs active. When watching something, I binge, scroll, or even worse, take my phone and scroll. I used to say these were normal habits until I went for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder treatment, which is still ongoing. I am currently uncovering quite a few bad habits. Story 85. Chewing my lips and cheeks until there is so much scarring that even my dentist wonders out loud what I am doing to myself. It has been mentioned here before, but brain noise. I have so many thoughts going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, narrating constantly that I have a couple of shows I have on out loud constantly that stop me from thinking for a bit. Somewhat. Story 86. A constant, unending curiosity about one narrow topic. I saw it as more normal because I have a brother with autism and a possibly autistic father. Story 87. Spending more than 8 hours researching a topic just so you can provide evidence when someone does not believe you, and they still do not believe you. Story 88. I was surprised to learn that not everyone is troubled to the point of being physically ill by repetitive tasks. Story 89. Being able to think in images has become an advantage for me. Story 90. For a long time, it did not occur to me that people actually feel a wide range of emotions with their bodies. And that metaphorical ones are also meant to make sense, like butterflies in the stomach. And empathy? You are telling me I am supposed to look at someone and feel what they feel? What sorcery is this? Story 91. I don't know if this is auditory processing disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I would think so because of unusual sensory experiences, but I can smell the inside of my nose unlike anyone else even when they have a stuffy nose. Story 92. Just got diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder a week ago today. I thought everyone else was suffering and struggling just as much as I was day to day, but just better at managing it. Turns out people are mostly fine. Wild. Story 93. I used to zone out so much that I would think what I was seeing was not real, as if I was not alive but experiencing life through this perspective. I later learned that this is maladaptive daydreaming. I have also, for some reason, started to hate when people sit behind me. I do not know when or why that started, but it feels like I can sense their entire body behind me. Story 94. Having a conversation out loud about something and a totally different conversation in my head going on at the same time, then changing the out loud conversation with a speaking of to the one in my head. I thought that was normal until my husband said, "We were not speaking of this at all." Story 95. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder here. I knew it was not normal, but I did not know how abnormal I was being until much later. I do not look people in the eyes enough, if at all, when I am talking to them. I tend to wander my eyes around, looking at surroundings, my hands or their shirt, hands, posture, and so on. I think it is because my brain does not want to focus on the conversation alone and wants to get a full picture of the environment. It is willing to use a small portion of space to note the surroundings. I have to make a conscious effort to look people in the eyes. Story 96. Music is always playing in my head. It has never been quiet there. When I was a kid, I would be humming something all the time without realizing it. It took me a long time to manage the impulsive side of me. I think my outward hyperactivity was finally mostly internalized when I became self-aware around 12 or 13 years old. I struggled to do tasks, sit still, and listen. Felt like torture, and I constantly got into trouble. My mom thought I was a horrible child because I didn't follow instructions instantly. Her go-to response was hitting and screaming at me. I was never allowed to say 5 minutes, please, or just let me finish this one thing. It was either do it instantly or get hit. It was awful. Then she would get mad if I did something instantly but wasn't allowed to say something like, put the lid on the pen, and I accidentally damaged something. Took me weeks or months to put clothes away. I still struggle with that, though not as much. The organizational system we had at my boyfriend's house doesn't work here, because I don't have space for a cubby of clean clothes. I only do things last minute because my brain won't focus until it's panic mode. That really sucks. I hate it. Why can't I just do things as soon as possible and focus like a typical person? I knew this wasn't normal, but when I told people, they just called me lazy and told me to try harder. I did try. I would sit in front of my computer all day and maybe write 2 sentences. I would try to read a journal but couldn't tell you anything about it no matter how hard I tried. Yet I devour books and love writing, but if I have to work on something I'm not interested in, my brain just won't do it. I'm not stupid, but my brain makes me feel like I am. The symptoms got worse when I was in year 11. That's when I noticed it became harder to focus. I was told I was a bad kid who needed to try harder. I always did my homework and classwork, but my struggles weren't acknowledged. When my grades dropped, it was all my fault despite how hard I tried. I needed help then and I still do, but it's ignored. I hyper-focus on things sometimes. I can go all day ignoring the fact that I'm hungry, thirsty, or need to use the bathroom. I have way more energy than my peers. If I get excited to do something, I'm all over the place. I play hard until my body drops from exhaustion. I have to hide my hyperactive side all the time. I don't talk much because if the hyperactive side comes out, I might start talking nonstop. My physical hyperactivity is easier to manage after I'm exhausted from exercise, but that's not always possible. Sometimes it's worse, and I have to train hard every single day just to keep myself in check. This is very difficult. I have to stay quiet and calm all the time, which is really hard. It becomes easier with practice, but it's embarrassing when it accidentally comes out. I didn't have any girlfriends growing up. As a girl, being rejected by your peers because you are not a real girl at age 5 is honestly one of the worst experiences. In the UK, you stay with the same kids until secondary school. If you don't have friends and are bullied, that becomes your life until you leave that environment. I have a few girlfriends now, but I am closest to girls like me who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as well. Story 97. Eating the same food for months until you absolutely hate it or hearing electrical noises. Story 98. I'm not diagnosed, but whenever I tell people about my habits and daily routines, they look at me like I am from another planet. For a long time, I thought most people had these experiences. 1. I constantly see past memories in my mind. Even while typing this, I can see myself, 13 years old, typing on our Pentium 233 MHz PC. 2. If I am tapping my hand somewhere, it must be a symmetrical tap. 1 left, 1 right, 2 left, 2 right. If I cannot get that right, I need to make a rhythm with the taps to end it gracefully. 3. Like some people have mentioned, I can hear electrical noises. I cannot make my wife understand why I hate the TV standby mode in our room and why I have to turn it on and off in the middle of the night because of this. 4. When I start doing something and am not focused enough, I get lost immediately. I have walked up and down the house many times to remember what I was doing. 5. I have to keep my things exactly in the same place always. Otherwise, I can lose track of myself. Earbuds in the left pocket, cell phone in the right pocket, wallet inside the left pocket of my jacket if wearing one, keys outside left. 6. I get nausea when I hear an off note while listening to music or something similar, like a note that is way too high or low when it is not supposed to be. My body feels weird and tingly. 7. I love having my things close to me, maybe in chaotic clutter, but it is my clutter. 8. I get extra stressed under time pressure even if I have everything ready, especially during work. I am not sure if I have a condition, but these are some of the things I experience daily, and people think I am weird. I am not. Story 99. The big one for me was rejection. I thought everyone had this gut-wrenching pain when someone said they did not want to hang out or when you receive what your brain assumes is a dismissive text. Turns out that is not normal. For me, it used to be so bad that it felt like my heart was actually hurting. I feel crazy describing this. Story 100. Apparently, if people need to do something, they do not need to convince themselves in 20 different ways to get up and do it. Story 101. Not having any mind-body connection at all and figuring out my emotions based on bodily symptoms is a terrible technique. Strong emotions have the same bodily symptoms, and I had just been calling basically every emotion stress. Story 102. Being so obsessed with a show to the point where it is your bedspread, you have flags of the characters, you cannot sleep without the show playing, you make your own clothes inspired by the characters, you make your own stuffed versions, you have cardboard cutouts, and you have spent thousands of dollars on cameos from the actors recognize your name, and it is the only thing that matters to you. Story 103. Having 10,000 variations of a conversation in my head before having the real one. Disliking cleaning and organizing. Story 104. When I get a song stuck in my head, it really sticks. That trick of just sing the whole song through and get it out of your system? Yes, it does not work when you have inner echolalia. Story 105. Walking away from a group conversation when it stops being interesting. Story 106. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, not autistic. I thought that I'm doing task B while I do task A because otherwise I'll get distracted and won't do either task was a normal thing. For example, writing papers for Class B while listening to the lecture in Class A. I remember getting a profoundly exasperated look from my psychiatrist when I was finally getting my diagnosis. Essentially, if you had mentioned this at the beginning, I would have already diagnosed you. Story 107. The brain noise, you're telling me most people can sit down and it is just silence in their head? Mine constantly sounds like Fenway Park. Story 108. Following rules precisely. Are you trying to tell me that no one else cares about the law and avoiding jail? Story 109. I thought I was connecting with people when I told them a story about myself in a situation similar to the one they had. No. Story 110. My inability to socialize with anyone my age. I was the kid who sat at the adult table because I could not stand being stuck with the kids and their immature thoughts. I understood the adult conversations and they were much more interesting to me, so I just assumed everyone was like that. Story 111. Being unable to listen to anyone or even think if your clothes are uncomfortable or you can feel a tag somewhere. Rotating the toes of your socks so a seam is not even close to hitting your little toe. Getting agitated, mad, or upset at the hint of being misunderstood. Noticing every little change in another person's behavior but being unable to understand why people get upset at your own behavior. Needing to reach a certain level of panic or urgency in order to complete any task. Story 112. It is apparently not normal to wash your hands after every chip. I just feel like I need clean hands to eat. Story 113. Having a very loud brain and feeling disoriented all the time. My first day on methylphenidate was incredible. Story 114. Chronic fatigue and overstimulation. For a long time, I thought I was sensitive and weak. I was not diagnosed until this year at 23 years old, and I am only now starting to unravel years of unintentional gaslighting. I really do smell, see, hear, taste, and feel everything more intensely than most others. I always thought they were just better at pretending and ignoring things than me. Story 115. Being unable to filter anything out. The only time my mind was quiet and I could read books and relax was on a large amount of party drugs. Currently, my brain is like, read, type, fan noise, kids snoring, itchy foot, pillow pressure, crumb and sheet near my knee. Story 116. In high school, I was friends with everyone. At lunch, I moved between the cliques without any regard for the social structure. It was so noticeable that my best man mentioned it in his speech at my wedding. Just a beyond friendly, gregarious guy. I had no idea that was unusual. Not at all. Story 117. I thought that everyone else just had incredibly high pain tolerance because they could write so much, so quickly, and so accurately for so long. When, no, the rest of the world is not in excruciating pain when writing. It is just me. Story 118. Constant movement. Constantly feeling on the edge of something. Unable to explain my feelings well. Needing or thinking I needed alcohol to blend in. I still don't blend in, but I don't drink anymore. It was too easy to become dependent on it to feel normal. My stims as a kid were very obvious and embarrassing. Teachers made fun of me in front of the whole class, often. I didn't get diagnosed until many years later. Forget those assholes. My handwriting was poor because my hand couldn't keep up with my brain. I constantly have a song or quote in my head. It is almost impossible not to vocalize it. Story 119. I thought the other girls were just better at dealing with how terrible nail polish feels, kind of like high heels, uncomfortable clothes, and makeup. I was over 30 when I finally found out most of them do not actually feel it at all. That is when I started the research, and it turns out maybe I am not just an introvert. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.